Let's talk some small changes. Two parts. Let's break it up into two. One, because Al and I are in the trade show business, let's talk exhibitors, right? Because you have event marketers that are running exhibit programs. They're also running host events and their own events as well. So let's break it up into those two. If you're running an exhibit program or you're running host events, right? You have your own event schedule and field marketing. What are some small changes or maybe things that people are already doing that is pushing them in the right direction that they can continue to do, they can document that they're doing? What are these small changes that people are probably doing or that they could be making?
I think some folks are still the little things. If we want to talk about little things, literature. Years ago, people bought tons of literature to an event. Not only does it cost money to print it, it costs money to ship it, it costs money for drayage fees, for handling fees, and most of the time they don't use it. All of what they brought at the show, it's a waste, it has to be shipped back. Clients end up throwing it away before they even leave the hotel. So that mindset has changed somewhat over the last few years, where
And the QR codes is a good way around it, right?
that's making a comeback. I feel the QR codes,
Yep.
and not only for that, it relates to also premium items. There's a big discussion about premium giveaways. What's more important? It has to be something that has to be perceived as a value, and it has to be related to what you do when you do a premium. But someone just presented to me last week a QR code way of getting premiums to people so that it's not something they're going to throw away again at the hotel before they leave on the plane. Again, it still has to be something of value. Example I often give my clients is cheap pens. If you bring 3,000 cheap pens and they break right away and they get thrown into the garbage. One of our clients actually came up with an idea of they had 25 key accounts they wanted to meet at the show, and they wanted to get them into their booth. So they bought 25 really expensive pens, and they sent the top of the pen to the client prior to the show to say, hey, come to booth number 516 and pick up the rest of the pen and they had an opportunity then to meet all 25 of those accounts, and they were able to obviously do some business with those folks. And it was something of value that those people perceived as a valuable item as opposed to a cheap pen. So it's that rethinking of what's important and what's of value, I think, that people need to have when they think about what they're planning for a show.
I think with what you just said there, Al, is on the topic of the giveaways. I'm a firm believer in kind of the strategy where they said, hey, we have 25 key accounts we want to meet. Even if you don't know, like just bringing a bunch of crap to hand out doesn't really do anybody any good, right? Why not have things that you're giving away, like you're saying, that are more meaningful, that are more significant? You could give away a weekend trip, right? You could give away a gift certificate to a restaurant. You could give stuff away that people come in to raffle to win, where if you're going to talk to 1,000 people in a week at a trade show, have 20 really good giveaways that people have to queue in for, that they have to sign up for. There's ways around just having crap, because crap gets thrown away. Even nice things get tossed away. Just think about the lineage of what happens once it's gone. What about like renting versus purchasing exhibits for someone's exhibit program? I mean, I've always felt like renting is an obvious, sustainable option.
Well, I've been in the business 33 years, and renting has always been part of our mix and what we do. It was never, back in the 90s, I don't think it was ever thought of as being sustainable. It was just made economic sense. Again, gets back to that build and burn thing I mentioned before, is instead of throwing it away, why don't you rent it instead of, if you feel like you don't want to own something like that. So the renting is definitely something I think people have been doing for years. It's just they never thought of it being sustainable, but it's definitely part of the package of being sustainable.
I mean, one of the trends I've noticed over 12 years is, if you're going to purchase an exhibit, you should be using it for multiple years. And I'd say 3, 4, 5+ times a year. There are just people that just want to buy exhibits because of the ownership. They don't understand renting. They just want to own an exhibit. I have seen more companies buy exhibits and tell us, we're going to use it. We're going to use it. But they don't have these shows booked. They don't know if they're going to go exhibit, right? And what they do is they buy a brand new booth. They use it twice, never gets used again. I had exhibits that sat in our warehouse for years that we'd call people that they kept paying for storage on. I think renting is a huge sustainable option, and it's something that is also economically better for clients sometimes, or most of the time. And it is truly a sustainable option. option. I mean, I have frames that we've been renting for a decade, things
Yep.
that we've been that's just constantly using. So when your exhibit's being built, it's not reinventing the wheel. There is no waste to it, but it's at least for the structure.
Yeah, I got a call about 6 years ago from a new client looking for a new booth, and they said they only go to one show every 3 years. The show they go to is every 3 years. So they said currently the exhibit house is storing the booth during the 3 years for them to use every 3 years. And I said, what do you mean storing? I said, this is the definition of a rental. This is what people should be doing to rent. And she said, they never presented that option to me. So again, goes back to our industry needs to be more proactive in doing the right thing for the client and what makes more sense for the client. I think people see that as a value. She bought into our program right away because of that. So they've been renting with us for the last 6 years. So they've done it twice since the show's every 3 years. So
smart. Marley, what about you? What do you think on the overall, like on the event side, whether it's with the, the organizers, the venues, or the people that are hosting their own events? I mean, what are small things that they may already be doing or that they could do?
So I tend to think a lot more macro than micro on that. And it's only because, between travel and energy, that's the biggest bulk of your emissions. If you're talking about sustainability within the event, that's a huge aspect, and measuring your energy for your venue, for your participation as an event planner and your travel is not actually that complex. And you can buy renewable energy certificates to neutralize your energetic footprint of sorts. I think ultimately there's so much opportunity to do small things. And, when we think of like the original OG thing for sustainability, I think most people were like, let's replace plastic, let's replace water bottles. And I think people psychologically go to the things that you see that are obvious, like waste, as the number one things to start with, when really those aren't the biggest emissions impacts. They are very important, and they're hugely important to brand reputation. But even like as if you're an exhibit house or you are a fabricator, changing your own energy within your facilities to be green energy, or, installing solar is in the long run going to be more helpful to your clients because your emissions are associated with your clients in the long run. So I think it's also just kind of being able to identify those buckets of what your emissions are and starting there. I mean, thinking circular around fabrication and design and exhibits is the key. So just to your point around modular, reusable, rentals are incredible, and being able to get creative around how those can play a different role or use upcycled materials or very hyper local in terms of where we're sourcing from are all ways that, it depends on, I guess, the audience, but I think when we think about travel, we think about energy and we think about sourcing. Every event professional knows exactly what that means. But oftentimes I wonder if people are identifying that, fabricated, wood for your fabricated elements could be either coming from, the Amazon and the rainforest, or it could be coming from FSC certified, more local vendor. And those emissions are very drastically different.
Yeah. So I was actually going to bring up, I was going to say reusable materials, right? Reusable, recyclable. Tell me about those two terms for events, for trade shows.
Getting back to rentals, I mean, the one part of rental, and it's great to reuse the hardware, but the graphics were often considered not sustainable. And the fact that they would have to be thrown away years ago if somebody was updating the marketing, whatever it might be. Obviously, simple things like don't dating things on a graphic can sometimes save the length of a graphic, so you're not dating it for that one event or purposing it for that one event. But I met the woman that runs Meet Green. I don't know if you're familiar with Meet Green. They're a company based out of Portland, Oregon that manages some shows. They manage the IMEX USA show that's coming up. Mm-hmm. And she mentioned to me last year, the president, that they found a way to take a lot of these destination graphics, the scenes from a lot of the destination shots that were used at the show, they found some senior citizens homes locally that they were able to put these murals up in their common areas. I mean, it's just that out of the box, that rethinking, how can it be repurposed? How can it be reused rather than throw it away? She went out of her way to find a way to get those things used, that there was a purpose that somebody could get some benefit out of that rather than throwing away. Updating that a little bit from my work with EDPA, we found a vendor now that will take printed graphics, even with SEG edging on it, and recycle that. So that can be recycled for repurposed for use on that. So even some graphics that are being produced today that we do are produced with plastic water bottles, made from plastic water bottles, which is another great way to reuse those water bottles to make the graphics we need to make. And then those graphics can be recycled. So it's a whole process.
Yep. I love the signage from plastic water bottles, from the ocean. They are infinitely recyclable. The hardware is reused. So it's not only cool. I did an event in April where it was 432 water bottles that made the step and repeat. And, we were able to talk about that in social media and just obviously very, very cool. I see that there's a few questions popping up too.